All right, well, let's get started. My name is Elizabeth Reddy. I am an assistant professor in engineering design and society and one of the core faculty in humanitarian engineering and humanitarian engineering sciences here at Colorado School of Mines. And I am so happy that you all are here. Some of you I know, some of you I do not know, but welcome. I'm going to be serving as your sort of tech assistant today and your moderator. So if you have any questions, if something's not working for you, I'm the person to DM. Last year, we started hosting a humanitarian engineering and science colloquium, we being Colorado School of Mines Humanitarian Engineering and Science program, and our partners in the Masters of Environmental Management program at Western Colorado University. So we started to host events like this as an opportunity to get together where we could bring people from our individual programs, but also people from different programs together to explore common themes of interest. For us, that's humanitarian engineering and science in its many different perspectives and many different orientations. So a lot might unite the people here today, a drive to do good and do good research and do good practical work. But that means that we get to have, and we should be having, really hard conversations about what that entails, how we should understand that. And we are lucky to have Kristi Disney Bruckner here to guide us in one set of conversations and tell us about her work today. So Kristi Disney Bruckner is an attorney with over 20 years of experience working with communities, companies, and multi-stakeholder initiatives as senior policy advisor for the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. I'm sure you all just say IRMA, but as a senior policy advisor for this organization, she assists with public engagement and partnerships. She has over a decade of leadership experience with Sustainable Development Strategies Group. And so what she does, among other things, is align management of renewable energy and natural resources with sustainable development. And this is just what she has given me as a brief introduction to her work. I am so excited to hear her talk more about what she's thinking about today. So on that note, Kristi, please take it away.
Thank you for joining in, and I welcome you to interrupt at any time so that we can have a conversation. And I have some slides that I'll share to accommodate those of you who are visual learners and would like to see something to follow along. And I'll share these so that Elizabeth can email them to you as well. But I'll be talking some about, what are some tools to use, and particularly how is the Initiative for Responsible Mining a tool for local level change, especially after the last 2 weeks of hearing in the news the work being done around the world and being focused in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties. There's a real impetus right now to speed up the green energy transition. So a lot of my work is focused on what does that mean for demand for raw materials, for conditions at the mine site level, for responsible supply chains, and the economic, social, environmental ramifications of those supply chains. And IRMA is a really incredible tool for many sectors to use to advance responsible mining and responsible supply chains. So I will give an overview of some of what you're hearing about and I'm hearing about with mining and the green energy transition, give a bit of background on IRMA as an example of an international voluntary initiative, talk about, what is the role of government versus a voluntary initiative. This is important for engineers as you may work for a company, as you may come to work for a government, and thinking about, where do roles align, work together, and think about this theme of, who is doing what and what are our roles. How to compare voluntary international frameworks. There are many for the mining sector. I'm only talking about one today. And the important role of you as scientists, as engineers, in improving environmental and social performance at the mine site level. So on the first theme of mining and the green energy transition, we hear new statistics every day, from the World Bank, that production of graphite, lithium, cobalt may increase by nearly 500% by 2050. We see graphs like this on a regular basis, looking at different scenarios for projected demand of materials. This one is from the International Energy Agency. And graphs like this, this is showing, just looking at the electronic vehicle sector, which is a big focus right now when it comes to demand for raw materials. The increased need for nickel, aluminum, for lithium, for batteries. This gives a closer look at some of the expected demand growth, according to statistics from Bloomberg. 14 times increase by 2030 of nickel, aluminum. And these may sound very familiar to many of you. And these are new graphs as well, thinking about, well, what if technology changes? What if there's a vast change in the circular economy and being able to recycle material? That changes demand. So this is looking just at lithium and what are some different projections. So this is a report from mining.com that goes through several materials. I think it's interesting to think about the circular economy is very important for all of us to be looking at and taking into consideration in these projections. And we also see in the news protests of many different types of mines. These are just two examples of lithium mines. In the same month this year, a protest in Argentina against lithium mining, and a protest in Nevada in the US against the Thacker Pass lithium mine. And concerns about a range of issues: environmental, land rights, indigenous rights, water. And then last week at COP26, this was the Transport Day of Action that brought together many NGOs and some international voluntary initiatives. And some of the theme around this protest was, we really have to think about the impact at the mine site level, the environmental impact, the environmental justice reality that many communities around lithium mines, around cobalt mines, copper mines, don't have access to electricity yet, let alone renewable energy, or even contemplate having the infrastructure to have an electronic vehicle. So there's a huge disconnect on social, environmental, economic levels. Many of these NGOs came together with this declaration on mining and the energy transition for COP26, expressing concern about the raw materials needed for renewable energy and calling for change, including using international voluntary initiatives like IRMA. Over 150 NGOs signed on to this declaration. Other concerns we hear are about deforestation, which is linked to climate, impacts on biodiversity, land. So there's so many different issues we have to think about, and it's one reason why, as an attorney, I like working with scientists, with economists, with engineers, and other academic disciplines so that we can work on these problems together. And importantly, that means listening to and learning from communities and local areas where we are trying to make an impact. So one way to address these issues is the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. IRMA is a voluntary initiative that uses market forces to drive change, but also works with governments to help improve legal frameworks and regulations, serving as a set of good practice and a benchmark. We see in the news on a regular basis now that companies like Tesla are getting into mining, are starting to talk about responsible mining, and IRMA is very interested in working with companies and other sectors to define what responsible mining means. So how does one know if a product has been produced in a responsible manner? IRMA has put together a set of requirements on 26 topics that was developed over 10 years through a multi-stakeholder process to answer the question, what is responsible mining? This became a point of focus for companies like Tiffany's, where after the Leonardo DiCaprio movie about blood diamonds came out, there were protesters saying, you need to source responsible diamonds, gold, silver. And Tiffany was saying, yes, we want to do that. So where should we buy our diamonds? Where should we source from? Where are responsible mines? And companies and NGOs, purchasers and unions, mining companies came together to answer the question, what is responsible mining? And it took time to answer that in a detailed way across those very diverse sectors. And after developing a standard to put together a third-party independent assurance system to audit at a mine site level against the standard for responsible mining. Every IRMA audit includes on-site visits to get input from local community members, from workers and others at the mine site level. They're publicly announced and the results are publicly reported. Of most importance to me and to the integrity of IRMA is leadership by a multi-sector board. My background is in social work and also law, but thinking about sustainable development, it has to have a multi-stakeholder approach. There needs to be a role for government, for companies, for civil society, and it needs to be managed in an equitable way. How do we equalize power differentials across those sectors? So IRMA has set up a multi-sector board that you see here. These are our current board members. That includes companies, purchasing companies, NGOs, organized labor, directly affected communities, and our newest sector is investors and finance. And each of these sectors has equal voting power in decisions made by the board. It doesn't mean that things happen easily. We have really hard discussions, and when we have hard discussions, that's when I know we're doing it right. We're really making a difference. So the standard for responsible mining is IRMA's answer to what is responsible mining. And it's over 400 requirements in 26 chapters, but it can be categorized in these 4 themes that you see here: business integrity, social responsibility, planning for positive legacies, and environmental responsibility. And it's important to IRMA that these issues be looked at in a holistic way. Yes, we have a chapter on greenhouse gas emissions, and that is a point of focus. But equally important is making sure that we're addressing Indigenous rights, worker health and safety, community support and benefit sharing, so that we're not pitting one issue against another, but looking at them in a holistic way. That isn't easy either. So I'm saying that, but it takes work to look at these issues, and that happens through IRMA audits and reporting and continuous improvement. The IRMA standard incorporates many other international standards that you can see a few of here. So these may look familiar to you: the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, OECD Due Diligence Standards, IFC Performance Standards, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, and others. Making sure that we're collaborating with other initiatives and have a cohesive standard. The IRMA standard applies to all types of mines and materials except for uranium, thermal coal, oil sands, and oil and gas. It also isn't used to certify deep seabed mining. So those are the limitations. Assessment is at the mine site level, and certification is at the best practice level, promoting continuous improvement over time. These are levels of performance under IRMA audits, from transparency to 100 IRMA certified. We haven't had anywhere close to IRMA 100 yet, but through transparency and continuous improvement, we're moving towards IRMA 100. IRMA's assurance process, again, requires on-site assessment so that communities and workers at the mine site level are heard and detailed results are made public. These are examples of one of our audit reports. This is from the Carizal mine, and you can see just looking at principle 1, there isn't even close to 100% score. It's 40.6. So we're meeting minds where they're at and pushing for improvement over time. The audit reports describe the basis for rating that you can see the example of here. And audit reports, they're over 100 pages of information on each criteria in the IRMA standard for responsible mining are freely accessible to the public through IRMA's website. You can see more examples here by chapter, just under the first set of chapters from this audit and some of the criteria. So I'll just pause there for a moment because that's a lot of information already just about IRMA, to see if there are any questions just about the standard.
Yes, this is Juan Lucena. I'm a professor in humanitarian engineering at School of Mines. Thank you very much for your presentation. It is not clear to me exactly what is that gets certified. Is it a company? Is it a mine site? Is it an area? So what exactly is the unit of analysis
Great
that
question.
gets certified?
So the unit of analysis is a mine site level. So some standards will only select a few mines of an overall company, but IRMA only will audit at the mine site level. And the reason for that is because the experience from one mine site to another can be so vastly different across a company. And, you know, if I'm a community member in Chile, my experience may be so different than a community member in Nevada, even if it's the same company running the mine. So we take each mine site as a single unit and a single separate entity. Any other questions? Elizabeth.
Kevin, do you want to go first and then I can take it?
Either way, I may have missed it early on. I'm Kevin Moore, professor at Mines.
Hi, Kevin.
It's not clear to me. Is it voluntary?
Yes. So IRMA is a voluntary standard. Okay. And the next few minutes of my presentation, I'll talk some about the pros and cons of voluntary initiatives. But companies undertake it voluntarily. It's not mandated by law. However, some NGOs have advocated looking at IRMA as a benchmark for improving legal frameworks. You know, my work in IRMA is primarily focused on working with governments to improve their role of law. That's my expertise, their supply chains and sourcing to make it more responsible. Looking at the good practices in IRMA. So it can be used in that way. And, but it is a voluntary standard.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take my prerogative and jump ahead. Casey has a question for you, but she can wait until after me. I would love, and maybe this is something that you'll get into and you can tell me if you will, but I think that some of our students, as they think about analysis that might not show an organization or a company in the best light, that might highlight areas for improvement, some get a little concerned about how to phrase or how to engage in ways where criticism doesn't become kind of defeating and doesn't turn off a potential partner. So I hope that I can invite you to kind of speak to to that, right? And how IRMA has managed to be a voluntary standard that, you know, people, mine sites are willing to bring in that might not say they're at 100.
Mhm. Yeah, well, we're in a very transparent world in which purchasers want more information, investors want more information, communities have since mining began been demanding more information, but this is all culminating together in a way that investors and purchasers are aligning with the need for a greater transparency on environmental, social governance issues. And I think that good leadership is being honest about where you're at and how you're going to improve. And that's what we see in IRMA audit reports. Is an opportunity to get a snapshot in time. This is where we're at today, and we're working to improve over time. And by the way, we're now in this network of other companies and NGOs and purchasers who have the same commitment that we do to responsible mining, and we can learn from them too. That we can learn from our peer group, but also we can learn from other sectors, and that's so important.
Okay, then I'll invite Casey to ask her question.
Yeah, hi, Kristi. I'm
Hi.
Casey. I'm a master's student in humanitarian engineering, and I was wondering what the best score that you've seen for a mine is, since you said that nobody's come close to the IRMA 100. So I was just curious about that.
I think right now, that's a really great question, Casey. And I don't think we've exceeded 75 yet. So, you know, I hope we'll keep seeing higher and higher numbers, but we don't want to lower the bar. We want to keep the bar high, and keep getting better over time. Okay.
Looks like
Can I
Jonah
ask
has
a quick
a question.
Jonah.
Then we can let you
can
go
you-
on.
Thanks. You had your slide talking about the different organizations and groups that are involved in your board. I didn't see anything. You sort of mentioned that part of your role is engaging with government. I'm wondering, at what level do you engage with government, and at what scale? Are you working with local government? Have you worked with countries? Yeah, if you could talk about that.
I knew you would ask a really great question. So we don't have governments on our board, but meet with governments to explain how the IRMA standard works, to go into a deeper dive on a particular chapter if it's a challenging issue, you know, to talk about how the legal framework could be improved to align with the IRMA standard. So those are all ways that we can help. And it's incredible. I've never seen in my career more focus on environmental and social performance in the mining sector and in supply chains, including from the US government. So it's a very exciting time, and I hope this time of political will doesn't close. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in this line of effort on government levels and company, investor, NGO levels as well. Well, I'll continue a bit after taking Mateo's question.
Sorry,
Don't be sorry. That's why I'm here, is to talk with you, please.
it's just my question fits really well into Jonah's. You mentioned that there is a growing interest in adopting some of these frameworks for mineral supply chains. So I was wondering if that has changed the amount of maybe effort or maybe the amount of resources that are out allocated by IRMA in the work with governments like you're doing in comparison to like expanding the participation of the voluntary frameworks?
Yes, it is wonderful to see. Yes, I think there is more revenue flowing to this type of work. It's never enough, but along with commitment comes increased investment in the work, and that makes it exciting too. IRMA is a very small NGO, but we partner with, as you've already seen, just looking at our board, some incredible local and international actors that help us expand our impact in a way there's no way we could do alone.
Thanks.
I'll continue a bit and pause again for some more great questions and reflections. But yes, we do see more demand for responsible mining, and for IRMA in particular, from NGOs like the Sierra Club calling for a high bar standard like IRMA, calling on the World Bank and its climate smart mining program and beyond to really promote multi-stakeholder initiatives like IRMA. And from this recent report from Europe, calling for mandatory IRMA certification from the EU, and we have not seen that from a government yet. I would be interested as well, and I could give another lecture on this at another time, how that might comply with WTO law. The World Wildlife Fund. And, most recently we've had a lot of interest from automobile manufacturers to use IRMA and to join IRMA, and a lot of those being automobiles that are shifting towards being 100% EVs. And that's where the automobiles are all going. But you can see some examples of company members here who are committed to responsible sourcing. So right now, 40 mining companies are engaged in IRMA, representing 53 mines. You can see some of the geographic coverage here and types of materials that are covered. A very vast array of materials, and we found that IRMA is applicable to all of these materials. And more recently, we're expanding and adding new standards. We started with the standard for responsible mining. Purchasers are demanding more to make sure that they're responsibly sourcing raw materials and want to know more about the supply chain. So we're adding 2 new standards, one for mineral processing, and that draft has been out for public consultation and is in a pilot phase. And later this year, we'll release IRMA Ready, which is a standard for the exploration and development stage of mining, which can have really significant environmental and social impacts and really, set the stage for responsible mining. And we also have a draft chain of custody standard that we're finalizing. So looking at, what is the role of a voluntary standard and the role of government? IRMA doesn't replace or compete with government. No voluntary standard does. but can provide added market support for government to help protect environmental and social values. I've spent most of my career working with government to improve rule of law, and the most challenging aspects of legal reform is enforcing that law, and through a set of incentives, reporting, enforcement mechanisms, and it is really challenging, particularly when there are limited resources for inspections and having human resources at the mine site level. So IRMA can complement but not replace government efforts, and can be useful across different sectors, companies, NGOs, and governments. But our first chapter is legal compliance. Local mine site, you need to follow the host country laws. And this may seem like a no-brainer, but some companies are not doing that. And if they don't have the host government enforcing the law, they need to show through an IRMA audit how they are complying with host country laws and permits. So this is where we start with the IRMA standard for responsible mining. But voluntary standards are one tool among others that can be used to promote responsible mining practices. There are regulations, there are company community agreements, a topic I'm very passionate about through the work that has been done with Sustainable Development Strategies Group and others. And there are market-based approaches like IRMA. And there are pros and cons, laws and regulations. There are pressures from different sectors to change laws and regulations. Some mining companies, but not all, may want less regulation. Civil society often wants stricter laws. Governments may struggle to enforce the laws they have. There's a huge push for access to information from civil society, from investors and purchasers. And changing regulatory systems really takes a lot of time and is important, very important. But a voluntary standard can be changed more quickly. IRMA standards follow ISEAL, which is the standard making body for standards. There is such a thing, and we follow their protocols, including revising standards every 3 to 5 years, and we aim for every 3 years to make sure they're relevant to experience on the ground. But all of these different wheels are working together, and we aim for them all to be moving in the same direction. And as I mentioned before, voluntary standards like IRMA can be used as a template to improve laws. This has been done in British Columbia, where 35 NGOs came together calling for IRMA as a recommendation for law reform, or can be used as a benchmark to identify and fill regulatory gaps. This has been done in Canada as well. And where laws and regulations are already strong, they can be beneficial for companies to show what they're doing through a public audit. It could be beneficial, as this report shows, for purchasers, showing that best-in-class standards such as IRMA can be a way to maintain competitiveness. we work with a intergovernmental forum that includes 79 governments, including this year, the US joins the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals, Metals, and Sustainable Development, and has this excellent guidance document on improving legal frameworks for environmental and social impact assessment in mining, and references IRMA. And we regularly participate in IGF meetings. So that's one way that we collaborate with governments as well. The US government this year referenced IRMA in this report on building resilient supply chains, and is showing, really serious commitment to environmental and social responsibility. So when you are looking at voluntary international frameworks, even if you think about when you go to the grocery store, there are all these labels, and it's hard to understand the differences in the labels, even if you just look at chocolate. But not all labels are equally meaningful. And this is the way that I look at standards, because I am regularly assessing different standards for the mining sector, how they compare and contrast with IRMA. So I look at these 4 questions. How is the system governed? Is it just governed by industry, or is it equitably governed by a multi-stakeholder group? Who's in charge here? That's very important. What does the standard say? What level of detail does it require? If there are very generic statements like the company shall engage with communities, is that enough? IRMA has over 150 requirements just pertaining to community engagement. When should that happen? How often? To what? With whom? What is the auditing process? Is it publicly announced? Are there on-site visits? Is it at the mine site level? And how are the audit results disclosed? To what extent are the audit reports shared? And are they accessible to the public? So you as engineers play such an important role, including with IRMA audits. We engage with engineers, starting with this mine measure tool. IRMA audits start with self-assessments. A company can't make any claim related to IRMA from a self-assessment, but allows the company to see where they're at and start pulling together information across different departments, including from engineers and scientists that work for the mine sites. So you can ask mines to use this self-assessment tool to undergo an independent third-party audits. You can look at the IRMA standard for examples of holistic coverage of issues in the mining sector, to better understand community engagement, transparency, access to information, to propose ideas for collaborations. We really love to collaborate, to promote membership in IRMA. NGOs, labor unions, directly affected communities can join for free. And companies and purchasers, we have reasonable membership fees. And we also welcome your input on standards. And through our website shown here, you can sign up for our newsletter. You can give your expert guidance on our draft policies as they come out. And I will always love to hear from you and have your inputs in our mission to promote a world where the mining industry respects human rights, aspirations of affected communities, and provides safe, healthy, and supportive workplaces, minimizes harm to the environment, and leaves positive legacies. So I will stop there and take more questions and comments from you.
To kick us off, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how much you work with like the role of engineers and scientists. Do they tend to be, when they're working with IRMA, on mine sites, or are there engineers and scientists that work within IRMA to develop meaningful standards? How do you all, what's the expertise that comes together to develop these standards?
Well, we seek out input on standards and standard revisions, and that's very important. The experience that engineers obtain, the practical experience and the academic experience really lends a lot to making sure that our guidance is practical and current and meaningful, especially in a time of rapid changes to technology. We want to remain relevant. And also, in audit itself, engineers will provide input to the documentation that goes into an audit, because it is covering so many different themes and topics that a broad cross-section of the mining company gets involved.
I have a question. Can I ask it, Beth?
Please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It wasn't clear to me, and maybe you mentioned this at the beginning, and if you did, forgive me. But I imagine when we look at the world and the number of mine sites, we're talking about millions. There has to be millions of mine sites. What percentage of that big number is being certified by something like IRMA or other platforms or frameworks that might have the same kind of goals in mind? Do you know?
Well, I just showed that we're covering about a little over 50 mine sites, so we are not a big percentage yet.
Okay.
However, the one role that we're playing is by providing a platform that is raising the bar across mining companies of different scales. So we're looking at industrial scale mines. So we're not covering artisanal and small scale mines. There is a chapter in IRMA that talks about the relationship that's important between large scale mining and small scale mining. But if you want to look at the percentage of mines we're covering, we don't have a big percentage yet. Okay. And we hope to continue to expand. And we also hope that the standard will continue to have a broader influence than even our audits can cover, to raise performance through what NGOs are asking for, through improving rule of law, and through having more mines undertake the audits. Will we be able to cover the globe? I don't know, but I hope we'll continue to cover a larger percentage. But that's a really interesting question. And as far as what all of the voluntary initiatives cover, I'll put a report in the link that might come close to answering that question, that the International Institute for Sustainable Development produced a few years ago, but I haven't seen any recent figures as far as coverage. But I think, quality of standards and audits is important. and looking at, you know, what is the detail of the standard, who's behind it, and what is actually reported, how was the audit conducted. All of those questions are important to the utility and impact of a standard.
And a follow-up question to something you mentioned in your answer, which is the relationship between the large-scale mining company and the artisanal miners. Can you help us a little bit there? Because I know there are a number of students in this call who are interested in the concept of conviviality between large-scale mining and artisanal mining. And of course, they could be perceived as communities, but they are a very interesting case because in a way, they're competing or could be perceived as competing for the same natural resource. Sometimes they're perceived as actually the ones that get the large-scale mining in trouble because they don't follow the regulations, they use mercury, et cetera, et cetera. So can you help us a little bit on that chapter between the points at the interaction between the large scale and the artisanal miners?
Yeah, so the IRMA standard takes a collaborative approach to see artisanal and small scale miners as a stakeholder. And in the chapter on artisanal and small scale mining, one of the requirements is, you know, where there is a presence of ASM, that the operating company engages with ASM entities and fosters a positive relationship with them. So that's, you know, making sure that mine security personnel are trained to respect human rights of ASM workers and other affected communities, and also performing due diligence and commercial relationships with ASM. So if a large scale mine sources materials from ASM entities, that due diligence is conducted, that the company is assessing social and environmental risks and impacts.
I'm going to ask a question now, and it's a follow-up question. It might be a difficult question. So if you have to answer this in like potentials or abstracts or think about another case, I invite you to do so. But it sounds like in the governance of IRMA, you're bringing a lot of groups to the table that might fundamentally disagree on priorities or things like what law applies in a given area. I mean, in the beginning of your talk, you probably didn't see, but in the chat, we were all discussing the Salton Sea lithium and maybe some contests over whose traditional land it was, on what kinds of priorities should be taken if decisions are made about mining. And it just got me thinking how hard it might be to get all those entities that you sort of pointed to even agree on kind of priorities or agree on shared language in order to say things like, yeah, we should like shared legal structures, right? So I don't know if I can invite you to talk about IRMA specifically, or maybe it sounds like you've had a lot of experience bringing different groups to the table, but how do you deal with those challenges when people like fundamentally don't just have different, like, you know, some different information, but fundamentally disagree or have different interests or have different ways of looking at the world? And they come to the table and you say, let's all make a decision together.
Yes, so there are many ways we do that, and I don't run from those conversations, nor does IRMA. It's one reason I love and appreciate IRMA so much, because when we find those tension points, we know we're finding a place where we found an issue to work out together. And it's likely not an issue that is only coming up in our board or only coming up in our working groups, but is happening in many parts of the world. So if we can work through it and explain how we've worked through it, whether it's through our standard, through, you know, a statement that we make, a new way of working together on our board, it's such a victory. So I run towards those moments and not away from them, because that's where I see we're doing it right, and it's hard. But where we start running away from that, those issues will come back in an ugly way, and it won't be collaborative. So, you know, we have an agreement of how we want to work together. We have a common mission and purpose. So at any point in time, members of the board may have really serious disputes on the ground against one another, but they come together in a board meeting ready to work toward this common goal. And I have deep respect across the many sectors working together on our board to put those issues aside and work on new standards and what we can find and promote in common. But it isn't easy. It takes a lot of one-on-ones. You know, sometimes we will have meetings that are just with the NGOs or just with directly affected communities, just with companies, just with purchasers, helping build understanding and then come together. But we come together and work through these issues.
Jonah, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, that'd be great. That's interesting to hear. One of the things I was thinking about is it seems that certain materials get a bit more press. And I'm sort of wondering if there's more interest in certifying, you know, when you're working with BMW or Microsoft or something, if there's more interest in certain materials on one side. My other question is, if you find that actually some materials are, you know, performing better, or that some materials are kind of you know, present more problems when they go through the IRMA process. I mean, it might be too early for you to tell, but I'm curious.
We haven't done an analysis across the various audits yet that would help us answer a question like that. But as we have more completed third-party audits, we'll be able to look at questions like that. It's a really good question. But I think we're a few years away from having answers to that. But what we do see is, you know, through all the materials that I presented earlier, that IRMA is applicable to all of them. So we haven't found that there's an issue that comes up from one to another.
Mateo.
Yes, hi again. So a lot of the conversations that we have in humanitarian engineering and science of this program talk a lot to do with how engineers engage with communities. And I remember you mentioning in your presentation that one of the things that excites you is the company community agreements. So I was wondering, what are some of the main tools that IRMA uses to ensure that the voices of the surrounding communities are heard and prioritized in those conversations with mining companies, while considering the, I guess, power differentials between those two groups?
Yeah, so in the IRMA standard for responsible mining, there is a chapter on community and stakeholder engagement. And that chapter provides detail about how to have inclusive planning, designing stakeholder engagement processes, you know, how to strengthen capacity of stakeholders so they can come into engagements from a more equal platform, so that they can understand studies and reports that come out, identify gaps. There's part of the chapters on access to information, on communications. And on the topic of benefit sharing, you know, where the company has an agreement with the community, then it should be implemented. I mean, it seems very basic, but it should be implemented. So there's a chapter on obtaining community support and delivering benefits, on following through on commitments to affected communities, and how to plan in a collaborative way, how benefits are delivered, and some of you are very familiar with this, but it was new to me when I started working in mining. I thought all of the issues at a community level were about environmental impacts, but a lot of the issues and a lot of the conflicts arise in how benefits are distributed, and where benefits from mining, whether it's jobs or otherwise, are shared in an inequitable way, that can really deeply entrench conflict that's hard to overcome within communities, between communities, and between the company and communities. So this collaborative planning process and following through on commitments is very important. And, following through on respecting Indigenous rights and the right to free, prior, and informed consent.
Thanks.
We have one more question from the group here. And I'd like to invite Sigourney Birch to ask her question.
Hello, my name's Sigourney, and I'm also a master's student in the HES program, but something I was really excited about in your presentation was mentioning cultural heritage as one of the standards, because that's something that's going to be very integral to my thesis. And I was wondering if you could elaborate more on how IRMA does that and what those standards kind of look like, or how they've been implemented in practice.
So I think we need another hour. This is a topic that I'm really excited about too. And I encourage you to look at the IRMA standard for responsible mining. But on cultural heritage, a lot of it's general around screening assessments for cultural heritage, and minimizing adverse impacts. And I think the best thing for you to do is read this chapter that covers cultural heritage, because we don't have enough time to cover it in detail. But it is a significant part of the IRMA standard and closely linked to respect for Indigenous rights and community engagement. But I'll put in the chat thread the full standard, and you can skip to that chapter.
Kristi, thank you so much for all your responses and your thoughts. Do you think that students could email you follow-up questions if they
Of
if they have
course. I'll put my email here in the link.
I think we are about at time, folks. And I want to thank you all for coming and for participating in this fascinating conversation. It looks like Kristi's information is in the chat right there. I encourage you to copy it and reach out, as well as some links to some really interesting materials to think with and play with in your work about mining and responsibility and responsible engineering and science. So I want to thank you, Kristi, for joining us, and thank the rest of you for joining us. Have a lovely evening.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristi.